This is The Extra Mile.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Extra Mile. I'm Caleb Spear along with
G5.
the G5, and today we've got the birthday boy in town. We have Rick Bloodworth, who is a minister up at the Happy Church of Christ. Rick, thanks for coming on, and how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Glad to be here. Appreciate y'all having me.
Absolutely.
So you're turning 25 again.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that.
Well, thanks for taking the time to come all the way down here to Lubbock and share some thoughts. How many years have you been preaching?
Well, since I'm just turning 25, I've been preaching for 24. Actually, about 26.
26. Right?
Wow.
George, you're 26, right?
In November I will be. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
I'm 24, so you're
Longer
as
than
long
y'all
as
have been
us.
alive.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Got a lot of people feel like they've been. I've been preaching longer than they've been alive.
It's a lot of wisdom, though, and something we're going to tap in today as we look at fathers and fatherhood. We know Father's Day was the weekend, was Sunday, right? Is it Father's Day Sunday?
Oh, right, because you just heard this is coming out the day after Father's Day.
That's right.
So a week ago today, Monday the 21st, it was Rick's birthday.
That's right.
Right, there we go. I'm doing math in my head.
You failed.
Yeah. I'm trying. Not very good at math. Not very good. But yeah, so it's Father's Day, so Caleb, naturally, who's not a father, is going to sit back and let George and Rick run the show here. Well, I guess I can go ahead and bound us right into the discussion of godly fatherhood. So the one question I could bring to the table, as I stated, not a father, but would like to be one day. What would be your advice to those who are not fathers yet, but would like to be or are planning to be one day?
I would get married.
That's step one. I've accomplished that. I am married. I've done step one.
I think the whether you're talking about becoming a father or anything worthwhile in life, the best thing to do is to make sure your faith is right with God. Make sure you're studying the Word. Make sure you're praying regularly. Make sure that your life's right before God, and that will assist you in everything, but particularly in being a good parent.
Yeah, and AJ and Sharice and Becca, they all go here, and those are your three kids, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear they're coming
knows.
here.
So I know. We see. No, I'm just kidding.
We're here to tell
Get
all
someone
their
in
dirty
trouble.
secrets.
And yeah, I think those is the foundation if we're gonna be parents, because if the kid comes and we don't know what we're doing, it's a big responsibility, and we're like, sometimes we feel lost, and that's a good foundation to have when that responsibility is on us now, and it can help us and push us in the right direction for sure.
Yeah. Deuteronomy 6, Ephesians 6 really posing on parents, particularly fathers, to bring up children in the way of the Lord. For you personally, get it, each family and person is different, but for you personally, how did you implement that? Were you the kind of planner dad, so to say, like here's devotional time, or were you more like spur of the moment, take advantage of an opportunity type of dad when it came to bringing up your children in the way of the Lord? How would you say you went about that?
Well, as far as devotional time and things like that, that was just a very small part of the parenting. I guess the best thing I should have given this as advice first is marry a good woman, because if the kids have a good mother, a godly mother, your chances for success are very, very good, and it takes both. But we made several things that very habitual. As far as before we got married, we were in agreement that when the doors were open to the church, we'd be there. We just understood that. We both had attended a Christian college, but neither one of us were daily Bible students. And before we had kids, we started reading the Word every day, which helped us to understand more of the importance of that. But as far as the kids went, we prayed before every meal. We prayed at the end of the day. We had a Bible lesson at the end of every day. When they were small, it was more of the storybook type, but it was a scriptural type of storybook. I mean, there's some that are not that practical for training up godly children, and so you want to be careful with that. But like I say, we are pretty habitual in that as far as the prayer and the Bible study were pretty specific times. We went to worship on the first day of the week. They were always at Bible class, Sunday evening worship, Wednesday evening. And while I'm a preacher now, when I became a father in the first, 12 years of being a dad, I worked as a real estate appraiser, and yet that was our habit. And it was one that never let us down. And it wasn't, when I say a habit, I don't mean we had a program and we exercised the program and,
Sure.
check. I mean, we were determined that these things were important, and so it became something that we didn't talk about. I don't remember there ever being a time, other than maybe on vacation, and we didn't know where a church was located, ever talking about, will we be going to worship today, or will we be going to Bible class on Wednesday?
It was just a part of life.
It was part of life. So our kids never had that growing up as far as, are we going to Bible class today? Are we going to worship today? That was just something that was they expected, and so that was the norm, and so that helped a lot. But like I say, just the everyday stuff, the character of being a Christian, as far as they needed to be truthful. They needed to not fight with each other. I know a lot of parents are really comfortable with, well, the kids are just going to fight, and it's just like, well, don't fight in our presence. They may have used knives in the bedroom when the doors were closed, but they understood that, and that they had to have good character in that. But like I say, it wasn't a Nazi concentration camp either. We had a lot of fun as we went through life. It was just, we had standards as well, and they knew what the boundaries were very clear for them and not confusing, and so I think that helped.
Clear boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, Deuteronomy 6:4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words I command you today shall be in your heart. Verse 7 sounds like what you're talking about here. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. Sounds like a very consistent 24-hour type of deal you're talking about.
Yeah, and again, going back to marrying a righteous woman, when we first started having children, my work week was sometimes up to 100 hours, and so that was one of the things that I own my own business, and everybody who owns their own business and says, well, it's wonderful being your own boss.
Heck, is it?
It is, but you have 50 or 60 bosses, and you have to work in order to put food on the table. And that's one of the things that took me a few years to get a balance on. At first, if we had work in, you did it, because there were a lot of times you didn't have work in, and if you didn't work, you didn't eat. And so when we had work in, I'd get to the point where I'd work all the time. And finally, I realized, probably when AJ, our oldest, was about 5 years old, I really started scaling back on the throttle. But Carolyn stayed home with the kids. That was something that we talked about before we ever got married, and very blessed to be able to do that. That's a gift God's given to us. I have nothing but admiration for moms that have to work, but I really appreciated Carolyn, because that was her desire when she became a mother, was stay home and raise the kids. And at first, we lived in a one-bedroom apartment with one child and one vehicle, and so she would drag our child to the grocery store in a wagon and thing. But as she did, we lived in Wyoming, a beautiful place, and she would point out, aren't the trees God made beautiful? Isn't the sunrise God gave us today beautiful? Isn't the river that God made beautiful? And so it was very much what you're talking about. And again, I attribute that to having a godly wife. Who loved God and loved her children, and it was just kind of second nature to her. And that helped it become second nature to me. And as I started easing back on the throttle and scaling the hours down, I had a lot more time with the kids and was able to kind of pick up in those areas. Now, having said that, with the work, let me be really clear on that. Work never came before the worship time. As I said, we had determined that before we got married, that God deserved that. It had nothing to do with perfect attendance. It had to do with service. And so even though there was a lot of work, when the doors were open, we tried to be there. And I think that really helped the kids have a consistency that may, not from a legalistic standpoint, but from a we're in Bible class on Sunday morning.
Right.
We sit still during worship, eventually, after some encouragement. And on and on. But like I say, we did talk a lot about God even before I became a preacher, just at odd, random times, random events.
I like how God, in the conversations that you're describing, isn't just some mystery. He's there. He's really a part of our lives, and he's working in that. And when you said you pulled the throttle on work a little bit, you gave away some hours in order to spend time with family. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. And found out that it worked out really good. As it turns out, all that the instruction to trust God really actually has practical application, and it really works. And when I got the more proper balance, it worked better, and especially as we started having more children and needed for me to be a little more involved than I was able to before.
Right.
So.
Sure. I hear a phone.
There's a phone going off.
I don't know. It's going to keep going
Enjoy that, but that's all right. You see that with a lot of preachers' kids as well. And I guess that was my biggest fear coming into that, being a preacher too. One of, I guess, is, just statistically, how do you say that? Statistically.
There we go.
Thank you. English is hard.
It's very difficult.
You see a lot of them fall away, and we have to ask why. And is the father less involved, or is the priorities mixed up? I mean, what do you see? I mean,
yeah, I feel like I hear that a lot, where preachers' kids struggle, or like you're saying, even fall away.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to just be preachers. I mean, it could be anyone really. But you look at the statistic. That's just what we see.
Yeah, that youth are leaving churches overall. But it's even more interesting when they're a preacher's kid.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't add up in our minds.
I know all three of your kids do a great job, and they're just so involved and active in their own faith and encouraging everyone else in their faith.
Yeah.
What's the secret there? What's the secret sauce?
I guess from the perspective of when I began to preach, I was pretty conscious of the fact that preachers' kids sometimes have a greater difficulty, and in a small town, everybody knows your kids are preachers' kids, and so it's magnified a little bit. So the way that I counterbalanced that was I got involved with coaching the Little League programs, whether it was baseball or basketball or whatever.
That's
and
fun.
So most of the kids in town that weren't worshiping at the Church of Christ knew me anyway, but they knew me as coach. And so they were more the coach's kids. and coach's kids have a different status, let me tell you. Preacher's kids are down here. Coach's kids are way up here because they think if they're good friends with the coach's kids that the coach is going to play them. So I got to know the kids in town, and I like working with kids. I never my voice is really loud, so I never had to raise my voice to the kids. I just did it for fun. I never. I tried never to be a jerk there, and I tried never to be overbearing in the pulpit. I've always tried to preach the truth in love, but preach the truth. I wanted to be firm with that, but I always tried to show that being a Christian was something that was a privilege, that it was joy. And I think that helped our kids to a certain degree. The only one of our children that I ever heard say later on had any trouble with being a preacher's kid was our youngest. And and she just had a little bit of peer pressure. I don't think it was as much as most people do. Yeah. And so we were very blessed in that. And we have a good town. Happy's a good, Happy's not just it's not just a name. And so
it's a town without a frown.
Yeah, that's right. It's a way of life. And so that helped a lot. But I think that came in. The other, and I think this is really critical. And we didn't catch it until all of our kids were gone, even though we were doing it unconsciously. And that was before our kids left, they all had their own faith. Every single one of them was convinced that they needed to be reading the Bible on a daily basis. We never told them you need to be a daily Bible reader, but they were convinced, and they all did that. They knew that we prayed with thanksgiving and with joy. I think one of my daughters could give classes on how to pray, and so we told our kids we may not always agree on everything, and that's just part of, even Peter said about Paul's writing, some of the things he writes are hard to understand, and Paul talked about disputable matters, which gives us the understanding that there are disputable matters. But they all understood, while we may not always agree on everything, if they ever left the faith, if they ever gave up on God, that there wouldn't be a welcome. And so, but and again, not from a harsh standpoint, but they all left believing not only in heaven and looking forward to heaven, but they believed in hell, and they didn't want to go there. And that's an incredible governor on your life. And so I think that helped the kids to a certain extent, maybe to grow up and maybe not have so much a stigma of being preachers' kids, but more of a focus of we're children of the King, not me, but we're children of the King, and there was a standard for being a Christian.
Yeah.
And so that helped a lot.
There is a mirror to that, though. I feel like how we treat, anyone, but how we treat anyone, let alone how we treat our spouse, how we treat our kids, probably says a lot about what we think of God. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So you're like mini king if you're dad, but you're not. I understand what you are saying.
I'm a benevolent dictator, is what you're saying.
A benevolent dictator. There you go. Yeah. Well, yeah, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And you kind of brought the fear in the sense of awe,
right?
Kind of like heaven, and then there's the fear in a sense of wrath, like you're talking about with hell.
Right.
That encapsulates it all.
Well, you go to Hebrews, and it talks about the fact that we all had fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it.
Oh yeah, neat.
And so when you have that, I think it's Hebrews 12.
Yeah, you got it.
It's. I was mentioning earlier, Jesus just said it was written. That should be enough for y'all. But Jesus also knew where it was written, so we should try too. But the point is, if the discipline is done right, it will result in respect. And if it's not done right, or if the heart is wrong, we can understand that there are people who don't respect God, and He's never had an improper discipline towards people. But the fact is, if you discipline well, if they know you love them, I think there is that respect, and I think that when you have a mutual respect, when the parents respect the kids and vice versa, then that makes for a very healthy life in every area, but especially spiritually.
Yeah, it does. Hebrews 12, 5 and 6 and 7. My son, don't regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. It's for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? And it goes in verse 9, the earthly fathers disciplined us, shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits? and live. So there's kind of mirroring, as I guess we're cheating into one of our last questions, though, if that's all right, George. Are we skipping too far ahead?
No,
that
it's okay.
How should fatherhood mirror our Father in heaven? That's a pretty broad question. It can go a lot of different ways, but how should fatherhood mirror our Father who's in heaven?
There's a lot of aspects to that, aren't
Sure.
there?
Yeah, there are.
Obviously, the greatest of these is love, and so when you think that God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, there needs to be an absolute love for one another. The greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. And so, if the parents have a love for God like that, and they love their neighbor, including their children, as themselves, and they don't get those two mixed up to where they're willing to bend the rules because they just so much love their kids or love their neighbor. But the love for God is, and Jesus said it over and over, but in John 14, He said, if you love me, you will obey. And then He also said, if you don't obey, you don't love me. And then He said, these words you hear are not from me, they're from the Father who sent me. And so if we have a good understanding of what love is, and we have a good understanding of who God is, and if we have a good understanding of His holiness, if a father can exemplify love in a good way, including in the area of discipline, which we just got through with. And let me talk just a little bit about discipline. Do we have time?
Go for it. We have as much time as you want.
Oh, great! I preach for 22 minutes on Sunday morning. I've never been given carte blanche. But discipline starts with instruction, and then it goes to compliance. And so, if you ever look at anybody that does well in what they do, a great surgeon, a great athlete, great mother, they have the instruction and they have the discipline, the self-discipline, that internal drive to comply. If you have that, then you don't need the next part of discipline, which is a rebuke. and the rebuke is, I've warned you about this. If you continue, there's a punishment for it. And the rebuke is also, I'm not proud of you. You're not doing well. When we talk about from God's perspective. Now, I do want to say, as parents, we need to be very cautious to let our children know we're proud of them for so many different areas. Benjamin Franklin was really good. When he had anything that was criticism, he would give something good. He would tell them what he wanted to work on. He'd give something good, reinforce the good. Well, he got that from the Bible, whether he realized it or not, because that's the way God treats us. It gives us something good. If you ever read in Revelation the instruction to the seven churches, Jesus will nearly always say, "You're doing great here. You're doing well here, but I have this against you." And then he will come back and say, "But you're doing this well. Continue in this. You'll receive a crown of life." Just whatever. But anyway, so when I say rebuke, the rebuke does have to be serious. There's consequences for this, either the removal of reward or the implementation of a penalty, or both. And the reminder of that. And then, of course, the final stage of the discipline, if it's not working, is the penalty. I love you, but I told you if you did this, you're going to get a spanking, or whatever parents do. We never locked away our children in prison. We never grounded. Ever,
no prison. Huh?
Ever, no prison time. We went directly to the capital punishment. So. We always tried to be fair as far as they knew in advance what was right and wrong. And if they did something that was wrong that we hadn't really covered, this is more the 4-year-old area, not the 14-year-old, then we would tell them, you can't do this, or that's wrong. This is why it's wrong, not just, I said so. Although sometimes that works pretty good too.
Because you were talking about it has to be clear.
Yes, but like I say, discipline, if you have that, if you have the instruction and you have somebody who is disciplined, they have the compliance, then that's discipline. You see great things come from that. Sometimes you do have to have rebuke, sometimes you do have to have punishment, but the whole purpose of discipline is to make sure that they are doing what they need to do so that they can receive the reward. Be able to work and put food on the table is a good reward. Going to heaven is a better one. Don't deserve it, but this is what discipline does. And again, if we have the right discipline, we have the respect, and that's a huge part. I talked so long I forgot where the question was going. What was the other part of the question?
Nah, I think George.
That was good.
I think George was looking at discipline as we were talking about fatherhood mirroring our Father in heaven.
Okay. That's right.
And you had thought of Hebrews 12, that God disciplines us just like a father here on earth that loves his kids.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. My mind went to communication, because you were talking about in the discipline. It was just straight up 101 constructive criticism, where it was, here's the good things, but here's the thing you need to work on, or you need to just change, like you were talking about, like with Jesus in Revelation.
And reinforcing that good again.
Well, Proverbs 3:27 says, "Don't withhold good from the one who deserves it."
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to Proverbs 23, and it says, "Don't withhold discipline from your child."
The way consistency.
And the point is that part of mirroring God is to give your child what they need to do well, and God does wonderful for us in that, and we do not do as wonderful. But that's what we're striving for, is to do that.
That's right. He's the perfect father.
Yeah. It always it scares me. Like I mentioned before, don't have kids. I'm not trying to play games with God right now about having kids right now. That's not the plan.
We're all praying that you do.
It always thanks, George. But it always scares me. But it's really cool. But it scares me that your kids are going to learn about God primarily from you and your wife. And that's really cool and really humbling at the same time, that you're going to present the idea of who this awesome God is.
Yeah, think about this. You've probably heard this example before. I heard it from a preacher one time. I thought it was brilliant. So this is not from me. Anything's brilliant you hear, as a matter of fact, I stole from somebody else. I just forgot to give credit to. But if you've ever flown before, you know what the steward or the stewardess does. You know,
sure.
in case the oxygen drops, you know, a little oxygen mask will drop from the cabin if it loses pressure. If you have small children, you put your mask on first. And the reason that they do that is because if they don't put their mask on first, the little child, if they panic and the parent runs out of oxygen, they're both lost. Oh. And so if you get your mask on first, it shows the child that that's normal for one thing, but it also, if they pass out from a lack of oxygen, you still can put the mask on. If we are doing our best to serve God in the very best way we can, then we can instruct our kids to do the same thing. And that's why hypocrisy is an absolute non-starter. We can't be hypocrites in it. Yeah. But like I say, that would
kids will see that.
Put your mask on first.
Yeah.
And then you don't have as much to worry about. It is an awesome responsibility because it's given to us by God. But if we take care of ourselves first, then we can take care of our kids. If we don't, kids have a hypocrisy detector from birth, and so they'll see that, and then you won't have a chance with them. You won't have as good of a chance. You'll have a lot of work to do.
Sure. Yeah, that's really good imagery. I want to say I've heard something similar to that maybe, but that's so important though that I can't help the passed out kid if I'm passed out too. Yeah, that's such a vibrant picture. You gonna say something, George?
I don't know if we should. I don't know. I was probably going to go in a darker place, but I wasn't sure.
Go in a darker place?
Darker place.
Talk about your parents for a while.
That's right. Yeah.
They're good people.
They're good people. They're good people. I was just thinking about, sometimes the father-son relationship or the parent-kid relationship has been hurt, damaged in a way, and it's hard to bridge that back. And I was just going to see what you thought about that.
That's one of the hardest things to do is go to your child and say, look, I was wrong on this. My conduct was not good. I'm ashamed of it. I've taken care of it before God. I'm sorry. You know, if I hurt you on this, or take somebody who has not been a Christian who becomes a Christian, or somebody who's not been living as a Christian, even if they were, and they want to start getting serious again. And the kids are 13, 14, 15 years old. Right. They don't want to get serious. What do you do? And the thing is, you go to them and you say, look, I was wrong on that. We are going to start now, to the best of our ability, doing what's right. Hope you buy into it, 16-year-old child, because you're going along for the ride. Unless you want to ride with somebody else. But I do feel like when we make a mistake, if we can admit it, that's hard, because parents don't want to let their kids down in thinking that they're weak. But that's not weakness. When you have something that needs to be taken care of, it needs to be taken care of right. And so you take care of it with God first, and then you prayerfully figure out the best way to take care of it with your kids. But for an example, we haven't been worshiping, if that's somebody's situation, and you just go to your kids and say, from now on, we're going to. I know we haven't been doing that. No, I haven't been doing well on that, but we're going to start. And I hope you will have a cheerful demeanor as we do it, because it will make it a lot easier for you. But I think it's that important. And I love you that much that I want you to be there with us. And in fact, I'm going to insist on it. And so there are things like that where you've made a mistake in the past, where you just have to own up to the mistake, but then say, but now we're going to correct it. What parent driving down the road gets distracted, starts going off the road and thinking, well, I don't want to look bad in front of my kids, I'll just go off the road and crash. Not one. You correct and you get back on the road. And I think that's what we need to do spiritually. There's one more thing that I know we're probably running out of time, but I do want to mention this. A preacher one time gave an example of what he had been doing for his kids, and I was a young father. Carolyn was a young mother at this time, and it made such an impression on us. And I can remember almost the exact words he said when he stated it to the congregation that he was preaching to. He said, I don't know how you're going to feel about this, but he said, when I pray, and he was an older man, had grandchildren at that time, when I pray to God about my family, he says, I pray that not one of them will be lost from any generation, but that they will all be saved. And his point was, if you inculcate that in your family to where you are praying, this is our number one goal. We want to be in heaven with God someday. The journey to heaven begins, if you want to be a servant for eternity, you have to be a servant now. And so this idea of we don't want one from our family to be lost, that's how important it is. When you have that as your number one goal and everybody understands that and everybody's praying for it, it really, really helps. And that's what I would encourage fathers to be doing. If they've never done it before, I'd start doing it. A day doesn't go by I don't pray that, and a day also doesn't go by that I don't make mistakes that could keep me from that I have to take care of. But like I say, that I think if we keep the goal in mind, it's just always easier to hit. Just shooting at random, hitting the target, you've got about a 0% chance. Aiming, you may not hit the bullseye every time, but at least you're doing your best, and that's always been the scriptural instruction. And I think if parents can pass that on to their kids, all I expect from you is your best, then I think we're going to be able to help them to become good servants and achieve that goal of not one from any generation being lost. It's a big goal.
Yeah, that's right. It is. Amen. Really good advice. All this beautiful relationship you're talking about, mirroring from the discipline to the unconditional love, it makes me think that no matter what state we are, father or not, or fatherless or not, that we do have a Father in heaven. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. We didn't receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but we received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. That word Abba there in the Hebrew is just really personal. It's like dad, kind of like in our language that we have. Beautiful picture we're supposed to show. Really good advice today.
Thank you, Rick, for being on here.
Thank you for having me. And maybe I should say one more thing.
Yeah.
The reason that our kids have done well is because they decided to do well.
Amen.
And so we had our part. It wasn't an accident, but they have never let us down, and that's unusual. And so we've had a pretty pleasant journey on that. So, but thank y'all for letting me come in.
Absolutely.
And
we really
visit y'all
appreciate
today.
it.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
I think that's a
That's a wrap.
wrap. Go so.
All right.